Being a marketer's no sweat. You just have to manage dozens of channels, launch hundreds of campaigns, score thousands of leads, and okay, fine, it's a lot of sweat. Unless you have HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools to help you do all that and more. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello everyone, so how are we all? What a weekend, and it's the very first of 3 game weeks in 7 days. Hopefully the next 2 game weeks don't go quite like this one did, which started with amazing promise, as we'll talk about in just a second, but ended up being another case of 1 step forward and 2 steps back, certainly for us anyway. Hopefully though, loads of you out there did do a little bit better than we did, probably down to only one man, whom we both had last week. We're going to leave it one more week and see what happens. Well, I think we might be making transfers tonight. God, such the nature of this time of year. Joined, of course, by Sam. How are you, mate? Had your weekend?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good weekend, although not so much in terms of FPL. But for once, Southampton didn't lose, and it didn't ruin my entire weekend. So that's nice. But of course, we are recording a day early because we've got a lot of FPL to get through over the next few days. So hopefully that's okay with you. It'll be a bit of a shorter pod today. In the meantime, though, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, we're going to have a bit of a shorter one. We'll run through the team updates. Due to the quick turnaround, we are going to go straight through to the preview, and normal service will resume probably this time next week. Obviously, we've got the tight turnaround on Thursday. I believe we're going to record the next pod, so quite a few coming. And in the meantime, we'll focus mainly on the previews. We'll be looking ahead at moves we immediately thought of in the knee jerk, and a bit of a discussion on if this is the time to say goodbye to a certain Brian Mbeumo in particular. And then, of course, best transfers, best captains, and bold claims for game week 14 and game week 13 past and 14 ahead of us, rather. It is Sunday, the 1st of December. Game week 13 is now officially in the books. So shall we take a look at the game reviews?
Yes, we should. It's not been a very good week, has it? Do we really want to? But I suppose we should. How did you do first?
Yeah, not well, Tom. So 62 points for me. Only 3 players in my starting 11 returned. Little bit of interesting trivia, and I'm not sure if I've ever managed this before, but my only 3 returners all got 2 returns each, which is kind of weird, and no one else got anything. The most frustrating of all was my forward line. Isak managed 20 minutes, Solanke managed none, and Pedro managed about 72 and did almost nothing. So a very frustrating week up top. Lewis came off the bench for his 1-pointer. But yeah, the only good things that went down in my team were Palmer, Salah, and Gabriel, who even Gabriel got subbed off at half time. So really not a game week that I'll remember for a very long time. And hoping to put things right in the short turnaround.
Yeah, it's awful, wasn't it, really? So I didn't fare much better than you. 67 net, 71 -4. Went ahead with the Matoma and Van Hecke moves. Deliberated for a long time. Lewis went out for Van Hecke, which I'm obviously fine with. The Saints goal, it was going to happen, wasn't it? And Johnson versus Garnacho. I ended up getting Garnacho off the bench because Solanke was a kind of a no-show due to a virus, but you can't legislate for that, really. It obviously contributed to your frontline woes, Sam, too. But yeah, I was deliberating between whether to sell Garnacho or Johnson, and sold Johnson in the end, just because I was just like, well, there's the kind of the benching potential, and I probably need to free up as much money as possible for Saka, because at that time, obviously, like we will talk about maybe Isak as well in a little bit. It didn't really look like Isak was, there wasn't anything wrong with him, because we just thought, oh, well, it's a good asset to have for the upcoming games. Well, and now, I've that 50-50, which is a 50-50 I couldn't really kind of legislate for, and did make a lot of sense to just free up maximum money just to make sure that I could get Saka without too many compromises. Now has cost me a few points, and yeah, it's just really annoying. But yeah, I mean, Friday was obviously great. Rocking with the Matoma goal, should have probably scored another one, to be honest, and probably should have got an assist at the very end too. So yeah, really happy with that pick. But yeah, it's just a horrible Saturday. Like the 3 PMs, I had Mbeumo, Cunha, Hall, and Isaac, and I almost jokingly put on Blue Sky, "Oh, I'm expecting 8 points from this lot," just because I always say, don't I, Sam? Like aim for the worst because then you're never disappointed. But I couldn't even get that. I got 7 because it went off early. It's an absolute horror show. In the evening, yeah, not owning Saka was just. I think that was just a death knell for the week, really. And then today, with the Slanky no-show, Garnacho come off the bench, I just knew that Johnson was going to score. I just knew it. And yeah, and then obviously owning Palmer was nice for the 14, and then Salah got his goal and assist as well, which was absolutely fine. But yeah, it didn't really do very much to arrest the slides. Another 100k down, and again looking at kind of, as I said at the very top, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It's just incredibly frustrating right now. And yeah, similar to you, Sam, I'm just hoping that over the short term, able to arrest this slide, because it does feel like, again, thinking back to when we were talking about this, I'm going to say 3 or 4 weeks ago, about sometimes you do need to just take a big hit and sort everything out. I still feel like I'm kind of sorting out the Game Week 6 wildcard, the debris that was left by that. And I also feel like, the likes of Isaac going off injured. I think I'm probably going to keep Solanke, but there's so many kind of little things that keep cropping up, and I just keep kind of ending up without the player that I want in my team. Like this week, I was never selling Mbeumo for Leicester at home for Saka, right? I was never doing that. So I can kind of make peace with that, but still, just like the comeuppance from not doing that, it's so painful, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It does feel like that Game Week 6 wildcard has left us almost always 1 move behind. And I didn't really help myself by taking those moves or away from myself with Son and Foden coming in all those game weeks ago. So that's a mistake that's kind of haunted me ever since. But other than that, it does just feel like where I've tried to be a little bit, I suppose, cautious on not taking too many hits and trying to slide too much and therefore doing more damage than good. In that process, I've kind of just been lagging behind, and some of the picks that I'd like to get to, I just haven't been able to quickly enough. That being said, though, I am generally pretty happy with my team if I make the moves I want to this week. And going ahead, I'm looking forward, and there's not too many other transfers left for me to make. So I'm really, really hoping that some green arrows around the corner and I can settle on a side that will hold me in good stead over the next period. But hey, I'm an eternal optimist. It will probably all go wrong. So I should probably maybe taper my expectations a little bit.
Yeah, indeed. So let's just kind of turn then straight away to the Game Week preview, because I said on this pod and the next pod as well, I think we just kind of respect the short turnarounds. I mean, obviously we love to look at the meta stuff and look at what's going on in the wider world of FPL and pick out a particular topic to go in depth on. However, I think that we'll definitely talk about a couple of things here. So selling Mbeumo is definitely a source of quite a lot of conversation within the community at the moment, as far as I can see. And that Action Jackson as well. Discuss him and what the situation is with that. We've put these both kind of under the knee jerk. I'm pretty sure that selling Mbeumo in some places is actually it's been part of the plan. This has been the time that people have been kind of planning to get rid of Mbeumo for other options. I mean, certainly we both kind of said, and I think this is completely justified, that releasing the funds from him to buy Saka, I think that's absolutely fine. But there's still obviously the counter narrative or the countervailing opinion. So Tom Jones, not that one, in the chat, it's just a person, I'm keeping Mbeumo for the time being, or at least he's a luxury sell, which is absolutely fine, because the obvious reasons. He plays 90 minutes, says Tom, on Pens, and Villa and Newcastle, the next two are both vulnerable. And it's really tough to kind of do it unless you've got that sort of real carrot of buying in Saka, especially after this week. It's been really rough. And I think that for us, it kind of is time to sell Mbeumo just because of that kind of necessary need, right?
Yeah, that's the only reason I'm that interested in selling Mbeumo at the moment. I think if it's a sideways move, in isolated events, it can make sense. I know Bowen is going to interest a few people. Mitoma is going to be interesting. And I've seen a few people talking about Rashford, obviously 3 goals in 2 now. But with Mbeumo, it has been frustrating recently. Last 4 game weeks, I think he's had 1 shot on goal, totaling, I think, 0.09 XG across those 4 games. So very annoying. But I would expect a system change coming with the tougher fixtures on the horizon. And that fixture change, whilst the fact that it does get tougher for Brentford, I think that puts Mbeumo possibly in a more central role rather than out wide on the right, which has been the source of plenty of frustration for the community over the last couple of weeks. I do see him getting that the number 9 dual role alongside Wissa in a 3-5-2 against some of this tougher opposition. And that might lead to a little bit of a boost in terms of the underlying data, even though it's against stronger opposition. So if I wasn't bringing in someone that I was just so much more confident of, regardless of fixtures, I think Saka, it just makes all of the sense in the world. I want to get to that triple premium midfield. Unless it's that, I could completely see the argument to just hold on to Mbeumo. There are other moves, like I said, Mitoma, you could look at Bowen, you could look at maybe Rashford once a fixture's turn, but none of them have penalties. And Bowen might have penalties. I'm pretty sure he does. And outside of that, it's not anything more impressive than Mbeumo's already put up this season. So I completely understand the logic for holding on to him if you're not moving towards one of those 3 premium midfielders for the time being.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to me to be the only kind of time you do it. And I kind of completely understand sort of kind of a friend of the pod, FPL Sports Science on Blue Sky, poking hornet's nest as he often does, saying selling Mbeumo is mad, which I know I do understand that, because as Tom said a minute ago, he's got his nice minutes, as you said, he's got those pens, and maybe it has been a tactical adjustment, which has seen him have one shot in the last 3 games, something like that, and certainly holding the line, an awful, as in holding the touch line, that is an awful lot over the last few games. But I mean, it really is kind of horse for courses, and obviously we'll talk Saka and the best transfers in, but I'm sure it was something like kind of 69% effective ownership at my OR, and kind of 86% in the top 10k as well. So there's definitely, as we spoke about in our Edge Pieces pod, Sam, that the opportunity to go against what is potentially a bit of a wallpaper pick a lot of the time in the community, like a bit of a hygiene pick, and try to compete against that with a Mitoma, or with a Semenyo, who's obviously now back from his suspension, if you're not going there, and plus you free up some cash. There are quite a few options within the bracket that you could possibly go to if you've got Saka already, or you're looking to do kind of something else. But I do think that it does sort of feel like one of those kind of times where, if you're jumping up to Saka, definitely, if the likes of Bruno Fernandes had a better fixture, had better fixtures over the next 3, then probably looking at him as well. But right now, it does. I don't know. I'm struggling really, apart from, as you said, Bowen, who I think will garner some interest with Leicester up next, Wolves and Bournemouth. Apart from him, I don't really see what else you'd really be doing. Rashford.
You do already have Mitoma, though.
Yeah, I know, but it's kind of the same as, if you already own Saka, then what would you do with Mbeumo? Would you sell him on now, or would you kind of keep him? I just feel like if I already own Saka, and I had, say, João Pedro, and I didn't have Matoni, but I had João Pedro, I kind of would feel like that's kind of enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'd probably be keeping him right now and letting others. It's kind of a case of, you're hoping others are making a mistake by selling off, aren't you, if you're in that situation?
Yeah, agreed. Like I said, I wouldn't be getting rid of him, I don't think, as a priority, if it wasn't for the fact that I needed to get to Saka, and he was the easiest way to do so. But yeah, I am worried that he will hurt me a little bit over the next few game weeks, even with the tougher fixtures. Villa, by the way, are all at sea at the moment, so I don't see that really as a massively difficult fixture for him. And whilst on paper, the FDR suggests the fixtures aren't great, you could easily see Brentford scoring 1 or 2 in all of those matches. So yeah, I wouldn't be too scared of holding on to him if you're out there wondering why people are getting rid. In our specific situation, it's because there's a premium asset that we really need to get to as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think going for Isaac in my case and in your case as well, after international break did kind of set us on a particular pathway. I think it's one of those where start of the season we kind of knew that this would be where the Brentford run would end, and I think initially there was definitely the interest in Bowen as that kind of 90-minute talisman who, as you said, may be on penalties and has that kind of I guess that sort of pedigree as well. Yeah, the pedigree, the consistency that you'd be expecting from a player like that. And I think it's one of those where there's no right or wrong, really. He's a great value asset, Mbeumo, and it's a reluctant sell for me, but I can definitely justify it by who I'm buying. But I think if you're kind of in a situation where you're not particularly sure, I think it's okay to give Mbeumo Villa, who are definitely suffering from classic Emery in the European competitions sort of syndrome, and really not the team they were last year. Very sloppy on the ball, I thought, and against Chelsea, and certainly for me at least, I'd definitely be giving him that game. And maybe, I don't know, I suppose if I was in the situation, I'd probably be kind of giving Mbeumo until maybe 17, and then maybe looking at Bruno after that, because United's fixture on then is pretty good, pretty much all the way till kind of 20th February, March sort of time. So maybe that would be your jump off point rather than now. Or maybe you get Bowen if he kind of starts to show a bit of form.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Earlier today, I was looking at that exact route to try and hold on to Mbeumo as long as possible before moving to Bruno. And I just couldn't do it with also trying to fit in Saka this week. So I've decided that Mbeumo is the make weight for Saka. But I think if you can hold on to him up until 17 and then switch across to Bruno, seems like a really logical move.
Yeah, so it is as a former paragon of this pod would say, it is tough. I completely understand why there's a certain reluctance to let him go, and I know that, for example, FPL Review absolutely loves the guy. One thing that did surprise me is that he's actually 35th overall. Well, he was, hasn't quite updated yet all of the games, but at the moment he's 35th overall for the underlying data, by which I mean non-pen XGI. So it's not as if he's been killing it in terms of the underlying stats. And you've always got the capacity, especially with Sade out of nowhere scoring a hat trick. You've got there are other players at Brentford who maybe will start to share the load, and there have certainly been suggestions that he's not the main man at the moment. It kind of is Visser, who is doing very well in the underlying data. He's 11th, and you've also got Mr. Thiago as well coming into the picture as too. So it's not as cut and dried with Mbeumo as it was. I know that kind of the analytics crowd particularly love him just due to the X minutes and the threat within those X minutes. But I would note that FPL Review is telling me to sell Mbeumo for Saka as well. I don't know whether it will be telling you to sell Mbeumo for a Bowen or something like that. I'm not sure, because I need to have a look at someone else's team. But even if you did want to free up some money for something else, so you did want to get Jackson in, then maybe there'd be a case to get Semenyo, that sort of thing, because they've got Spurs next, there's no worries about that. Then they've got Ipswich on the weekend. Semenyo's had his rest now through his suspension. Absolutely fine for me. So there's loads of routes you can go. I think everyone is quite valid, which is kind of makes me glad we're not on Twitter anymore, because it would definitely kind of be a division factor, and there'll be all these sorts of camps, wouldn't there? But I think now it's very much kind of what's best for your team, and with this year with all the different kind of free transfer permutations and everything like that, I do feel like it's definitely one of those that you just have to think about it for what works for your team and your kind of onward planning. There's one other player as well within the knee-jerk, I think has continued to beguile FPL managers. We're not really too sure exactly what to do with this guy. It's Nicholas Jackson over at Chelsea. So, I mean, it's definitely one of those, and I posted this on Blue Sky earlier on. That reminds me a lot of former Chelsea striker Diego Costa. I'd look at this in 2017, Sam. So that's, Christ, what's that? 7 years ago, 8 years ago?
Yeah.
And Diego Costa, right? He had 4 yellow cards by game week 6, and so by game week 7, people weren't buying him. I know he'll get the second yellow card at some, 5th yellow card at some point, get that suspension. So people didn't want to buy him. As it was, 12 game weeks went by. He accrued 81 points before people actually did go there. Now,
that's mad.
I'm not. This is obviously an extreme example, which obviously looks lovely because it's another Chelsea striker, etc., etc. And speaking to some people online about this, and obviously it's an availability heuristic thing. There's loads of examples as well, of course, of players who did get the 5th yellow card pretty much straight away. But this is a kind of extreme example of what could happen if you avoid a certain player. And Jackson, we've spoken about him so many times already this year, I think. But he's second overall for non-pen XG this year behind Haaland. Seems to be kind of ticking along very well. And it kind of feels to me, I don't know about you, but it kind of feels to me that outside of maybe a Chris Wood or something like that, we've been kind of casting around a little bit for that kind of second striker. The absence of Ollie Watkins in particular from that role last year, where he was just kind of the guy that you sat in alongside Haaland, who again has kind of left our teams. He maybe is emerging as the one who has that consistency, as well as being quite nicely priced. And plus, with Chelsea's fixtures, it does look quite good to kind of go there at the moment, I think. If you've got Isaac, who is very, very unlucky, I think. I don't think it's been the case that he's had one particular injury which has been lingering. He's had several injuries, hasn't he? He's had a broken toe, got poked in the eye. This time, an impact injury. I mean,
all things that he can't control, by the way.
I know.
It's not like a recurring hamstring thing or like a muscular injury. It's all like impact knocks that could happen to any player. It's very, very bizarre. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Maybe he's just cursed.
Well, that's the only thing. Like I looked at transfer market a little while ago before I brought him in, thinking, okay, well, is there something which is kind of, I guess, a thin red line which goes through his career, which we can look at and go, oh, he's a bit like, I don't know, he's always got a hamstring problem or something like that. He doesn't. He hasn't got anything like that. It's all different. It's like an arm injury, a shoulder injury. He's ill. He's done something to his groin. He's got a thigh problem. There's nothing which is kind of it's all the same. But what I suppose I did overlook was that he keeps getting these little injuries, right? Which might mean that he's a little bit fragile. As a player, it might be that he's one of these people who, if you're a little, I'm a bit like this, to be honest. If I'm a little bit sick, I make most of it, and maybe that's kind of what he's like a little bit. Maybe he does have that fragility, which is obviously not ideal. If I think we kind of, it's difficult to. You don't want to hindsight it, do you? You don't want to be like, oh, it was definitely a terrible move. I don't think he was. It's just, if you've got a player who was coming back into quote unquote form, the bet was that he kind of kept that up. But now he does seem a bit more vulnerable than before. And someone like Jackson, Sam, I suppose, is definitely on everyone's lips in the community, isn't he? Especially with Southampton up next.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a lovely fixture now. And just in case anyone's missed this, Southampton will be going into that with their 4th choice keeper, most likely being the starting keeper, Lumley, as well as our best centre-back, 2 best centre-backs out. So Harwood-Bellis and Bednarek are both out. One is suspended, one's injured. Downs, who is literally our most important player in terms of the way we build out from the back, is out with a suspension. And Dibbling, who's also been a revelation, is out. So it's going to be a really tough game for us. And yeah, I mean, Jackson right now looks red hot. He's in great form. This yellow card thing has really been plaguing me over the last couple of weeks already. And I can see it turning into a Costa problem where I just keep ignoring. And tonight or tomorrow, I have a decision to make whether or not I move Isak across to Jackson or to Cunha. So both have plenty of merit. Cunha has worse data in a worse team, maybe a little bit more secure on minutes, but Jackson, much, much better data in a better attacking team, better fixtures over a longer period of time. It's just he's going to almost certainly miss one game at some point. And I think in FPL we get really, and this was one of our mistakes to avoid, by the way, which is interesting. We get really kind of focused on one game week at a time. We think it's the be all and end all. And I think with Jackson, looking at the fixtures that we talked about last week for Parma, over all the way through till March, I think it is now, Chelsea have a an absolutely unbelievable run. And Jackson, at some point, was almost certainly going to get rested at one point or another in that run anyway. So this yellow card thing could just be the time where he gets the rest. And is it worth just maybe casting more of a long-term view on this player who is clearly right at the top of his game in a very well-oiled machine right now, and just kind of forget about the 1 week that he misses out, especially if you're using your budget to have an 8th attacker and you can afford to bench him without having to make moves as soon as it's suspended. If you've got a Rodgers or a João Pedro on your bench, or the combination of both, you could probably get away with it for 1 week if he was to be suspended. And I think the points in every other week look decent enough to make up for it.
Yep. No, I'm definitely kind of really interested in bringing him in. I think that he's rising tonight, isn't he? And I think that you point out those fixtures, and we've been pointing them out for a long time. Feasibly, over the course of that run, you could look at it and just think, well, okay, if he's scoring what's tantamount to a goal every other game, and he has got that explosivity about him. We even saw that last year, didn't we? Despite him being kind of pilloried a little bit. I mean, he always had the underlying data. It's a bit sort of reminiscent of Watkins a few years back, before he became what he did eventually kind of turn out as being, which is a very kind of consistent FPL asset. Jackson maybe is kind of, don't forget, he was one of those players who kind of didn't come to it from perhaps the upper echelons. He came into it through, wasn't he linked to moving to, I'm sure it was like Brentford or something like that. He was kind of being linked to before he ended up going to Chelsea from Villarreal. He kind of had a ridiculous kind of half a season effectively, and that kind of led him to go to Chelsea. And from there, it was kind of like, quite not dodgy data as such, but very sort of circumstantial. And he did need time to adjust to the Premier League. The underlying data was always as it was, but I mean, he's only been, I suppose he's actually been playing. This is his 5th season in playing football. It was just quite astounding, really. And maybe it is the case that a player can improve if they're putting up the underlying data. We had that kind of hot period at Villarreal, which led him to go to Chelsea last year. He did put up the numbers, even if kind of they weren't realised. I think it was like a 4 or 5 goal on the performance from memory. And this year, maybe he's just improved. And okay, it is Chelsea. So come January the 1st, it may be that Neymar shows up, and hey, we've all got Jackson in our teams. But you can't really control for that. And right now, it does. I don't know. It feels like, especially with the carrot of Southampton, the weak of Southampton, as you detail, Sam, it does feel like I might just go for it. And I don't know. I just look at with Isak, who he would be replacing, and both those moves, by the way, would basically enable Saka. Looking at Chelsea's underlying team XG versus Newcastle's, and what we've seen with Newcastle recently, it felt like Newcastle had kind of turned the corner a little bit, but I don't know, maybe it was a bit of a false dawn, maybe. And actually, they are still kind of struggling in those different ways. And there's definitely a few rumblings online and in the press about how maybe Howe's kind of reached the end of his cycle, whereas Chelsea seems to be on the up in terms of the underlying data. They were 5th before this weekend. I'm sure they may have leapfrogged into the top 3 by now. And the data updates tomorrow. And having Palmer and Jackson versus a weakened Southampton does feel like it's a good thing to do. And you've got Spurs in 15. As you said, there's going to be a yellow card related rest somewhere. But if you can pick up a player who can come off your bench, that you're happy to come off your bench, then I think you're probably right. And this is the time of season where, I'm a 3-5-2 devotee, but even I don't have the 3-5-2 anymore. I don't have a Stewart or something, because we're all going to kind of be deepening our benches anyway. And so, yeah, it feels like he's not quite the next bandwagon, because I think the trainer's already kind of soaring, but it does feel like he'll be one of those who hopefully you get a couple of weeks out of meaningful points before he becomes wallpaper. Maybe he is the one who is going to be that consistent kind of pick in the forward line, especially with Haaland faltering. So, yeah, I quite like that as well. I'm not sure whether I call it a knee jerk, basically, to bring it back to the section of the pod.
Yeah, I think that's completely valid. I think it also just comes down to which strikers are you missing out on already. So I've got a pretty big decision to make whether it's Jackson or Cunha. You, of course, already have Cunha, but he does seem to be ticking all of the boxes, bar the penalties. That's the only thing that I can mark against him right now, other than obviously the yellow card, which we've already kind of dissected anyway. But the data's great, and Chelsea look like such a coherent force right now. They know what they're doing. They know the system inside out, and they've had some tough fixtures, and they've already looked good. This patch of fixtures coming, there are players within that side that are very serious flat track bullies, and I can imagine them really starting to put some teams to the sword over the Christmas period. So Jackson, yeah, double Chelsea attack might be the play.
Yep, don't mind it at all. Europa League and European football goes on a hiatus from next week until early next year. So I think you'd probably be all right there, really. And he is the established number 9. There may be a rest somewhere, but I mean, them's the breaks really with all big teams, especially in congested periods. So yeah, I think selling Mbeumo is, to conclude with knee jerk, is horses for courses. If it suits your team and your aims, then fair play. If you want to keep him, fair play. I think every kind of argument's merit. And Jackson, I think certainly right now does look like a straightforward pickup, especially if you are looking to move on Isaac. Maybe you're trying to make some money from selling Haaland to buy, I don't know, Saka or Salah. I think that he's the obvious one to go to, and you swallow the yellow card when it happens, because it will happen at some point. But looking at Diego Costa, for example, maybe not less than you should probably take to heart, because there are probably loads of examples of players who did get 5 yellow cards. But in that extreme example, you missed out on so many points if you were playing, but then didn't go to Costa. So yeah, I think that might be the time to go for it. Cool. All right. So just keeping with the transfers, best transfers in and out. Let's have a look at what's going on in the market, the old market forces. Unsurprisingly, a small man from North London in Bukayo Saka is leading the transfers in. Almost 400,000 transfers in for Saka. I'm sure that'll only multiply. I do think that this, Sam, was the last week where we could have feasibly just about gotten away with it in terms of the underlying data, right? The effective ownership, right? Past this point, I think that he is going to be wallpapered to some extent. Everyone's going to own him, and you're going to kind of forget about him being in your team. But at the same time, it's probably just too dangerous not to go with him.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's going to get to a point now that perhaps I wouldn't go as far as to say a template side will form, but there will be 3 very popular picks in the midfield, and they all cost a lot of money. So getting to them as quickly as possible obviously might take a couple of hits here and there to do so. It will certainly take a hit for me this week to get there, but I think that 4-pointer is less than a goal for any one of these midfielders, and they're scoring every week at the moment. So it seems like it will pay off. And with Saka, the fixtures, like with Chelsea as well, Arsenal's fixtures for a very long time are absolutely superb. They've gotten all of their tough away games out of the way pretty much already. That is nailed into that side. He's so important to what they do. And with Ødegaard and Timber kind of linking up really well down that right-hand side with him at the moment, I can see more and more hauls coming.
I think what we need to just point out is that, one, I think that he, as a player, is definitely hitting that next level. That's a bit of an eye test thing, but he is just so bloody good. I mean, you said when you saw him in the flesh not very long ago that he was just outstanding. That was the game where he didn't do anything right.
Incredible.
Yeah. Just, and with Ødegaard coming back, the cavalry has arrived effectively, and it just seems wild not to. And crucially for FPL, outside of VO, what he does, even though yes, maybe the explosions historically have been few and far between, but what he does, he raises the floor of your overall score every week. Like, he's dependable for getting an assist every game or something like that. I think it's a goal in every 4 and an assist in every 2 is what the underlying numbers suggest. But that is absolutely fine, because that's probably going to come with bonus, and it's probably going to come with the whammy of not owning him. Something's going to be you're going to have somebody in your team pull it out to basically oppose him week to week. And yes, maybe you won't captain him that often, and you're paying I guess you're paying extra for that consistency, but it definitely feels like the case that it's not worth opposing him any longer effectively. I don't know. I've said at the start of the season in my bold claims that I'm backing him to effectively take over from Salah this year as kind of the go-to midfield pick. It's not quite happened yet because Salah's had a bit of an Indian summer, but I think that he is just kind of stepping up, and we have those good fixtures you mentioned, Sam, and it just feels like a bit of a no-brainer to go with Saka. So yeah, that's kind of top of the transfers in. I'm sure that was only going to magnify. I think he's going to rise again tonight. So again, if you want to get him in, go for it. Nicholas Jackson, who we've discussed, 250,000 transfers in for him. Salah, over 100,000 transfers in. Same with Palmer. Cunha has still been brought in, Sam, and there was definitely a bit of disappointment. I think it's 2 goals in the Bournemouth game, no involvement for him. Strand Larson owners loving life again. Some discussion of kind of the goals that he scored against Southampton and Fulham, having a bit of low XG, worldy quality to them. But I still kind of think he's definitely worth a look, especially Everton in dire straits. And there's still 4 good fixtures for Wolves before kind of things turn. I mean, you said you were kind of quite interested. You're not sure about him or Jackson. I mean, are you still kind of interested in Cunha, or has the Jackson chat made you think, okay, maybe that's a bit clearer?
I'm still 50-50, to be very honest. Cunha has a lot of other benefits that I really like about him. Like I said, the data is not quite as good. He has definitely overperformed this season so far, but he is on set pieces. He is on penalties. He is a 90-minute man, not playing in Europe or anything like that. So I don't have any concern about rotation. And he, again, is just such a big bonus points magnet that anything good he does will also come with almost guaranteed 3 bonus points at the moment. So yeah, I still really like him. The next 4 fixtures are absolutely incredible. Everton, who've just shipped 4 to United. West Ham after that, who've just shipped 5. Then it's the 2 promoted clubs, Ipswich and Leicester as well. So it's a great little run. And yeah, I've got a serious decision to make. Also, that 0.9 saving on him over Jackson could be used elsewhere for me. So it is a serious decision I need to mull over. Of course, with Cunha, I also don't need to worry about the one game that Jackson will almost inevitably miss. So yeah, he's very much in my thoughts. I think if I was really pushed to take a decision tonight, it would be maybe very slightly Jackson, but I could go either way at this point. I was hoping this pod would help me clarify, to be honest.
Well, I think I'd be going with Jackson if you have a 50-50 between the two. I think that if you're buying Saka, you've basically, similar to me, got your Palmer, Saka, Salah triumvirate in midfield. And as we've discussed with Jackson, you've got that longevity in the pick. Whereas Cunha, for me, is one of those players that, yes, I'm more than happy to own. I'm still obviously really happy with the purchase. But after Leicester in 17, I'm going to be looking at him probably and thinking, all right, where can I go from here? I think that's going to be the thing. And realistically, in terms of actual time frames, you're talking that's literally 2 weeks away. Whereas with Jackson, yeah, okay, there's going to be a week where he misses a game, but you've still got Rodgers, haven't you, hanging around, who can come off the bench for that, and you've got João Pedro, so you've got that kind of rotation. You've always got that sort of 8th attacker ready to go, and he is one of those players who, he's a player that you're buying for the medium to long term. Whereas Cunha, good player, love him for what he's done for me in FPL this year, but he would be a short-term pick. Game week 18 to 26 for Wolves, that's a big long stretch, aren't good. And the next few are pretty good. And there's no denying that. But Jackson's are equally as good, and you can hold him even longer. So that would make me think that, okay, yeah, there's 0.9 difference. What would be 1.0 in the morning, but you can find that money elsewhere. There's always kind of some way you can kind of make a bit of a cut. Selling a Lewis for, I don't know, a Kwanzaa, if it turns out that he kind of gets the nod in Konate's absence. You can always find that money, but you'll be buying a player of Jackson where you've just removed a headache. And week to week, I mean, especially now, I think there's definitely a movement towards him. I'm sure everybody else who's doing a show is going to be talking about Jackson. There will be people will vote with their feet towards Jackson, and getting him in now probably just removes an exposure, every week to week. In the same way that, when you bought Palmer, it was like, phew, finally I've got him. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I think it wouldn't take very long, especially after the Southampton game, if he does go off in that you'd be thinking, oh crap, I need to just get this guy, because at the end of the day, it's just costing me points not owning him. So that would be me really if I had the choice between one or the other.
Yeah, fair enough. That is quite a convincing argument. I think because I've got the depth, Jackson could be an opportunity that I can grasp when others maybe can't. So yeah, fair enough. Thank you. Appreciated.
Yeah. Okay. Well, see how you go. Not very long to decide. Canase,
Yeah.
as just mentioned, being sold off, and unsurprisingly, I think he posted on Instagram he'll be out for. He was disappointed to be out. I think he'll be out for a little while. I think it's like 4 weeks. I saw. So been sold by quite a few. Defensively, I'm sure I saw earlier on. Yes, it's true. Wan-Bissaka, 2 goals and 2. Sam, must own
Essential
attacking asset. Yeah. 100,000 transfers in for Wan-Bissaka, and then Gabriel, obviously, who got 45 minutes, but in that time got a goal and an FPL assist. So it just makes a lot of sense really going forward. Haaland being sold still by a lot of people. I can't remember what it was. I think it was like kind of 30-40% EO, which is staggering, really. That's the nature of the thing. I would say that versus Nottingham Forest might be, we'll talk about it in a minute, but in the captaincy consideration set, and 15 versus Crystal Palace, he's definitely in the captaincy consideration set. So it's one of those where you know what you're doing. It might be worth just getting it done, especially if you don't own Salah or Palmer or something like that. Guardiola being sold by a lot of people, didn't play tonight, I don't think. So that kind of makes sense, especially because you're probably going to be wanting to free money, and City aren't exactly defensively solid at the moment. Like the data's wild, honestly. I think it's over the last 6 they were 5th from bottom or something like that, and
I think it's even worse than that now. I think they're towards like the bottom 3 in terms of XGC for the last 5 or 6 game weeks.
It's ridiculous. It's just, I mean, I was out for most of that game, but no, from what people were saying, I'll watch it again in a little bit of match of the day. But some people were saying, "My God, they just look so cooked from the very beginning."
They look tired. They look really tired.
Yeah, I think this might be the year that you just give up on them altogether, and kind of cast out what you know. And then finally, Isaac is being sold, 180,000 transfers out for him. So yeah, Isaac, maybe worth just meditating on for a second. Spoke about the injury record, etc. But I mean, is it just the case that Jackson's put his hand up, Sam? Are we losing faith with the Swede too quickly, or is it just a combination of issues like Newcastle looking a little bit below par, and got Liverpool next, and he just looks, as I kind of intimated earlier, a bit fragile. These things all making you think maybe I can just live without, even though they do have Leicester and Ipswich coming up in 16 and 17.
Yeah, I think if no other strikers were really putting their hands up right now, I'd probably happily just put him on the bench this week against Liverpool. And this was the fixture that I wasn't too keen on owning him for anyway. So if I could survive this week with him on my bench, whether it's an injury or whether I just wanted to bench him anyway, it would have kind of just saved me a bit of a benching headache, as you'll see in my bus team in a moment's time. But with so many strikers, Jackson and Cunha in particular, really putting their hands up at a bit of a cheaper price that also enables me to get to Saka this week, it just makes sense to get it done, to be honest. And whilst I expect him to come back in pretty quickly because it's an impact thing, like you said, maybe there is something to be said for the fact that he does keep getting like these little recurring things. It's different parts of the body, but there's something going on almost all the time with him. And maybe that's something to take into account over this really busy fixture run. So yeah, maybe he's just my cash cow now. Unfortunately so, because I was really interested and intrigued by him and excited to have him as a bit of a differential on my side. It hasn't worked thus far anyway. And now it could just be an opportunity to cut my losses and bring in someone that I know is going to be fit for game week 14 and probably has better upside anyway.
Yeah, and the effective ownership never actually got very far. Maybe a bit of a underlining of the fantasy football community. It did feel like there was a time 2 weeks ago, just a week ago, it feels like everyone was bringing him, everyone owned him, but he never did anything but. He was never anything but a dice man for me in live FPL terms. So it's not like you're taking a big risk by like a Mbeumo. You're selling like a high owned player with a lot of owners who may well kind of be hurting you week to week with the points he scores. You're kind of just swapping out, yes, a player that you've probably had to maybe change your transfer plans to get, or had to kind of move your structure in my case to get for another one. But I wouldn't ever kind of fall prey to sunk costs with a player like that. Sometimes it is just worth kind of seeing what's in front of you. If there is a better option, that's absolutely fine to do, especially if that option, in the case of someone like a Jackson, is a player that you're going to be keeping for a long while. And if you've got kind of that bench player who can come on when Jackson doesn't play, then, as we've discussed, all of those things are absolutely fine to be held. So, yeah, I can see why people are going the way they are this week. Don't really see much else on top of that. I have noted there's a lot of people now looking at Matoma as well, which I would heartily recommend that you do. A very good player, and a bit of a slowdown on the João Pedro train, Sam, too. But I would note that obviously it's a Thursday that they play, so Friday to Thursday. So I think all of these players can be absolutely fine then. João Pedro, some of the positioning was quite worrying, wasn't it, if you're an owner in that game? But that's kind of what he does, isn't it? He just plays all over the pitch, I guess.
Honestly, with João Pedro, I think it was actually quite clever what they did against us in the first half in particular. It seemed like a bit of a game plan to just give João Pedro whatever run of the pitch he wanted. And it seemed like it was almost tactical that he was dropping into those pockets on the left-hand side to give us a bit of an overload to deal with. And to start with, we didn't really have an answer for it. We kind of figured it out towards the second half, and he did start playing a little bit more centrally at that point. So interesting to see that position change. But yeah, like you summarized a minute ago, João Pedro is a guy that will get licensed to do whatever he wants on that pitch for Brighton, within reason, of course. And if he sees fit to drift out left or out right, they'll let him do so, because he's that mercurial talent that they've got and kind of hang their hopes on to create something out of nothing. So whilst it was a bit of a frustrating game for him, even the sheer fact that he was given that license is quite encouraging for me. And again, it's worth just noting he's an under 6 million forward on penalties with good data. Like, we're not expecting a goal every single week, but this is still a very good asset in terms of the price point you're looking at. And there's no one else even close at that price. No, so yeah, I'm happy enough to own him. The fixtures, Southampton was a good one, but he's still got good ones to come. And I think it will balance out over time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he was one alongside Morgan Rogers at the start of the year. We looked at him just like, that he's underpriced. Like, that's wild that he's down there. Admittedly, Welbeck was the one who went off and absolutely smashed it at the start, and Chris Wood as well to a lesser extent. But yeah, he's definitely a cut price talisman. Absolutely fine. I'd be more than happy to be going with that one. Cool. All right. Anyone else on the transfer, Sam, to discuss? I think that's probably pretty much everything. Isn't it? 4.5 cheap defenders, I think, maybe as well. In the meta a little bit. So a bit of frustration with a few players. People kind of maybe selling off a Canate or something like that to free up cash. So looking around the kind of the 4.5 million defender sort of bracket. That's a Kirkez probably. Speaking to friend of pod Libero earlier on, like Kirkez, Van Hecker and Colwell were the three.
That's
he was
pretty much
about.
it. Yeah.
I mean, we know who the teams are who are coming up with good fixtures. Like Van Hecker kind of felt like last week's buy. If you're buying this week, it's probably going to be Colwell. He was limping at the end of the half time, but with Fofana being out, I suspect they'll patch him up and just throw him onto the pitch again, to be honest. I've always liked
90 every week so far. I think it'll be okay.
Yeah, and I've always liked Kirkez. I think he's to the eye, he's always kind of in those attacking positions, good crosser of the ball, good work rate, good vision, a decent technique. Hang on, that's Football Manager. But yeah, he's a really kind of one of those players that I've always really liked. I just didn't buy him because he was playing two of my forwards in 2 weeks, Cunha and Slanky, but now kind of wish that I did buy him and just kind of forgot about it, to be honest. But hey, always on the list for me, and still 4.4. So a decent buy-in. Cool. All right, should we turn the page to bold claims?
Let's do it
this week.
Yeah, simple one this week. I got close in the end. I went for Palmer 3 or more returns. He got 2, so not too far off, but I don't get any points for that. Tom, you didn't quite get yours either.
No, I had Everton get a result against Man United. That did not happen.
I mean,
suspect
technically they got a result.
they did get a result. You're right, but
It's
a
not a very good
result
one.
rather than a result. I suspect that you'll see Dyche and you'll see Lopetegui both be subject of a corner flag announcement
Yeah.
on social media very soon. But yeah, not a good week for the bold claims. Still stuck on 2-2. Hopefully, this is going to be the midweek that we sort it out, Sam. What have you gone for this week?
Of course, I've gone for an Mbeumo haul since we're both selling him. So I'm going to classify that as 10 points or more. So basically 2 returns probably. Yeah, I can see it against Villa. I would not be shocked whatsoever. But it would be sod's law that the second we do get rid of him finally after 4 weeks with 1 shot on goal, he goes and bags a brace or gets two returns of some sort. I can see it coming.
Yep, fair play. And I've gone for the old classic 5+ goals in Spurs versus Bournemouth.
We love a 5-goal Spurs game.
2
We love
teams
it.
who are in the top 4 for Team XG. Neither team, perhaps it's fair to say, the best at the old defensive stuff. So I'm anticipating that to be a great game, to be honest. I'm jealous of the likes of you who have got Semenyo, Kirk as owners, Evan Nielsen owners, all of you. And I'm hoping Slanky's back for that, especially because it's Slanky versus the old club narrative. Oh,
yeah, same.
I think that's going to be a great
He's
game.
just ill though, right? So he should be okay.
Yeah,
just a quick summary.
Yeah. I think he's staying should have mentioned him in the transfers actually, but he's staying on for me.
Yeah, good.
I do think a lot of people
Same.
A lot of people have rolled him on, haven't they? Especially if you're kind of looking at Mr. Jackson for him. But yeah, I mean, I just like the X minutes basically. Just obviously quite funny that this week was the week that you're like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. A Slanky, good differential, X minutes, home game, doesn't play. But yeah, he's got 2 games against teams that he used to play for in Bournemouth and Chelsea to come. So hopefully that's where Dom Slanky Mitchell will do the business. Right, final thing this week, best captains. quite a busy picture on the old on YouTube with
all the premiums.
Salah, Palmer, Saka, and Haaland lurking behind them. I mean, I think
they're all good.
Palmer, isn't it? It's got to be Palmer this week.
For me,
there's worries. I think there's maybe could he be rotated? Blah blah blah. But I think you're probably all right. And he's got a rest coming up next midweek because he doesn't play in the European team. So I think it's just going to be Palmer as the EO leader, but there's definitely considerations for Salah against the faltering Newcastle, Saka, who's just in sparkling form. Man United did obviously win 4-0, but it was against Everton, less convincing against Ipswich. And I don't know whether Arteta will. I don't know how Arteta will set up, but I suspect we may do something. And Haaland's at home against Forest, so there's definitely a lot of options on the table, aren't there?
Yeah, for sure. If you wanted to go for an alternative captain this week, all 4 of these are great. For me, I will revert back to my earlier points on Southampton, that whilst we've actually looked a little bit better in the last couple of weeks, we're still leaking goals, we're still making mistakes, and we're missing some really important players this week coming. So Palmer, in the spaces he operates in, I can see points, and he does tend to be a pretty serious flat track bully against the promoted sides and the weaker defenses generally. So yeah, I can't really see beyond Palmer on this one in particular, unfortunately. Although I hope I'm wrong as a Southampton fan, kind of.
Yeah, I don't think you will be, but
no,
I
don't think I will be.
I mean, there's definitely
we have looked better though. I will have that said on the pod. We've looked better.
You have looked better, and there definitely have been moments where certain individuals may have used particular chips against Southampton, and they've managed to frustrate them. So there's definitely something there about it. But I suspect that most people are going to look at, hey, Palmer. Oh, he's playing Southampton. I think that's where the captain's going to go. So there's all these options kind of out there. But unlike last week, where there was a bit more of a spread, I think this week you'll probably see most people sticking with Palmer. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some people who default to Mo, just because he is in form and all of that. But nonetheless, I do think that Palmer's probably the one against a weakened Saints. Actually, a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I thought there'd be a lot more kind of points on the board to be made there, but no, I think probably just worth keeping it simple, stupid, as per one of my mantras for this year. And finally, our team and plans for this week. Quite a lot going on. Quite a lot of surgery needed, maybe for me. But for you, Sam, I mean, just looking at your team there, it looks absolutely fine to me.
Yeah, I mean, arguably I could roll. No, I need Saka. I've got to have him, surely. So Mbeumo for me is going to be the transfer out. For Saka, I nearly was able to do it without a hit, but I got priced out of it in the last few days. So yeah, unfortunately, I do need to find the money elsewhere. Isak is probably the most obvious one, especially because Jackson is waiting in the wings, Cunha to maybe a lesser extent as well as an option, both of which I can afford, and probably slightly siding towards Jackson after this pod today. And that would actually give me a bit of a benching dilemma. But if Solanke's, if in any way a doubt, then maybe that makes things a little bit easier for me. I think overall, and maybe your opinion on this would be good, Tom, I think I'd probably be benching Rodgers out of those 8 if I did bring in Jackson and Saka. And then if Rodgers was to come off the bench for Solanke, let's say he didn't recover from illness, I'd be obviously absolutely fine with that. Aston Villa at home to Brentford, you are expecting goals. It's just his data's not been phenomenal. He's probably the least promising of the attacking assets I've got right now, generally speaking. So I think he's the most benchable. But yeah, I out of this team, I think just getting to Saka for the long term is just going to sort me out nicely. Take the -4 now, and defense, I don't think it's too bad. Lewis probably needs to go in the next few, but he's got 2 decent fixtures against Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace. If he keeps his place, then I don't think I need to force it.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. I would be benching Rodgers. I think the time has maybe come to just deem him as a really, really lovely first bench option. I mean, you got him at 5.1, didn't you? I mean, that's absolutely fine. Leave him there. Be more than happy about that. But I wouldn't be doing anything more than that. And yeah, I think that's great. I mean, there's maybe an argument that you look at João Pedro for benching because Fulham defensively have been quite good this year. I think they're still in the top 4 or 5 for XGC, but you kind of be thinking, well, okay, you've got a team who's good for XGC versus a team who's pretty good for XG, improving for XG in Brighton. I think it's probably Rodgers, and it seems like a lot of a chat from the Villa fans, just from a rudimentary look earlier on today, is that maybe Rodgers is kind of in line for being taken up the firing line at some point over the next kind of few weeks, because there are quite a few options hanging around on the Villa bench, like Buendia, Ramsey, and so on. I don't know if Ramsey might be injured actually, but there are a few players who can come in to step in at least for one game. So I think you're probably okay on that. So yeah, I'd be benching Rodgers, I think, of those.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much. On to yours then, Tom.
Cool. So I've got 2 things I could possibly do here. I need to get Saka as well. The initial thought was Mbeumo and Garnacho out for Saka and the 4.5, who'd have to be dibbling, because simply there's no other options. But that would leave me incredibly light this week. I think that would basically leave me with if Isak plays or not is kind of a bit of a moot point. But I need him to, because I'd have Mikalenko playing against Wolves, against Cunha, and which would basically mean that Hall away at Liverpool is my only bench option. That doesn't feel too good to me, honestly. So I think what I've done is I've whittled it down to 2 routes. The first one is Mbeumo and Isak out for Saka and Evan Nielsen. So I really like, obviously, Bournemouth fixtures going forward. That would mean that I keep Garnacho hanging around even longer as first bench, losing value, and obviously loads of money that I could use in my team. The other option, which I'm favouring, is a -8, which so going nuclear this week, just to, as I said right at the top, just sort it out. So Mbeumo, Isak, and Garnacho all go out. Saka, Jackson, and a 4.9 midfielder or below, well, 5.2 midfielder or below that I that I want that it kind of can sit on the bench but play if needed. Come in. I'm going to need somebody who probably can deal with coming on if Jackson's not out. I'm kind of wondering whether that's a Mad actually. It just
Yeah,
seems like he's kind of nailed down that role.
he's been good.
In the United in the 3-4-3 and impress the coach. Like if it doesn't work out, then fine. But he can sit on the bench for quite a while. If he does have to come on for 1 week with Jackson that's out, that's absolutely fine. But basically, what it does is it gets me Saka for Mbeumo, gets me Jackson for Isaac, who may not even play, and it removes a big problem. In Garnacho. I really wish obviously I could get a Semenyo or something like that, but I can't. And it will have to be a player like an Ahmad. I was looking at Enzo Fernandez, Enzo as well at Chelsea, but I don't know. It's one of those two. But I kind of feel like I might just go with that. Get Jackson in, get that sorted out, and probably will favour Ahmad because I don't want to triple up on Chelsea with a enabling midfielder, just in case, at some point I may want a Colwill or something like that. So I don't want to close that door to myself and make things really awkward, put myself up that cul-de-sac. I'm fine with having Ahmad there, and then obviously I've got Saka. So I think that's probably where I'm going to end up. In fact, I'm going to have to make that decision in the next few hours. So, this may be the last time I speak to you before I take a -8 and further torpedo my season. But hey, I mean, that leaves me with a front
You've
8.
got a while to go yet before you're down at my rank, mate. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, maybe. But that leaves me with a front 7, effectively, of Saka, Palmer, Salah, Matoma, Jackson, Slanky, and Cunha. And that also means that I can take out Slanky for somebody else at some point to free up the money if I need to, or go back to 3-5-2 if I were to sell Slanky all the way down to a Cameron Archer or something like that and upgrade Ahmad. So I think that's where I'm going. I think I'm kind of 80-90% of the way there, which is kind of all you need, really. Maybe another beer while I'm uploading the pod will confirm this to me. But I'm going to have to make those moves tonight just due to the price changes, I think, at the moment. So, yeah, that's where I am. And I think that we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, this is the end of the hit, Sam. Hopefully, I'd have righted my team, but I'm sure I'll be back here on Thursday or next week just being like, oh, I've got these further problems, or I need to get Mbeumo back, or I don't know, Matoma's fallen down some stairs. Obviously, don't wish that on the player and hurt himself. I need to get rid of him now. So, yeah, and there's always going to be ifs and buts. I'm sad about not having any Bournemouth though, and that's a bit of a problem. But I mean, there's no way I'm selling Cunha, for example, at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely not. And to be honest, I think once these hits are taken in both our teams, the sides do look a lot more promising. So fingers crossed that none of these issues that seem to be consistent for our teams keep occurring and we can finally get on the front foot again. But yeah, we'll both, I think, be taking hits tonight to kind of right the wrongs of this previous game week. So wish us all luck if you are out there listening. As always, if you have been listening, thank you so much. We really appreciate you choosing us to be your pod of the week, or one of the few pods of the week, because it is such a tight turnaround and there is so much content out there. So thank you very much if you are listening to this one. We will be back again on, I believe it's Thursday, right, Tom?
Yeah, we're back on Thursday, probably at some point during. I think the Bournemouth, Spurs, and probably Fulham, Brighton will be going on behind us. I don't want to be up really late. I just had my first day at work as well, so I'm going to be an absolute wreck. But we'll make it work at some point. We'll put a pod out. We'll be live. We'll put a pod out. Appreciate that most people won't be kind of watching because they'll be watching football, but absolutely fine. And we'll do something similar to this, maybe almost definitely even shorter, just because I think the next deadline is on Saturday morning. So it won't be in the ether for very long. But yeah, you got to do what you got to do around this time.
100%. And yeah, if you're not able to watch it live, no problem. It'll be ready and warm waiting for you Friday morning. Get it in your ears at that point. No problem at all. In the meantime, though, thank you all so much for listening to this one. We have been Who Got the Assist. If you do want to find us on socials, on Blue Sky, we are WGTA or FPL Pricey. On Twitter, we're WGTA_FPL, and I'm FPL Pricey on there. Instagram and Threads, it's WGTA.FPL. And again, I'm just FPL Pricey on there as well. If you did enjoy the pod, if you could give us a follow, that'd be greatly appreciated. But if you could also give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening, or leaving a like and subscribing on YouTube if you're watching along with us. That would be really, really appreciated.
Yeah, definitely all those things. Thank you very much, Sam, for your time on this Sunday. And we hope you enjoyed the pod. Thanks for your time for listening. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope we assisted you looking at midweek. We'll be back on Thursday, as mentioned, for a really quick turnaround pod again. Have a good week.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.